Garbage stays with the garbage. That's what my father said into the wedding microphone, holding up the cracked old passbook my grandmother had pressed into my palm an hour earlier. He didn't just laugh at it. He dropped it into the silver bucket, sweating beside the head table. The one with 2 bottles of champagne tipped sideways in the half-melted ice, and the whole tent of 200 guests roared like he'd told the joke of the year. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I rolled up the sleeve of a wedding dress I'd put on layaway for 14 months, and I plunged my arm into that freezing slush up to the elbow, fished out the soaked little book, and walked out of my own reception without looking back at a single one of them. Before I tell you what was hiding inside those waterlogged pages, and how a thing my father called trash ended up being the exact instrument that took his whole empire apart, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments, what is the cruelest thing a family member has ever done to you in front of a crowd? I read every one. I mean that. 3 days later, I stood in the lobby of a Heritage Bank branch on King Street West in Toronto. The kind with the 20-foot ceilings and the brass and the marble floor that throws every footstep back at you twice as loud. After the screaming and the cake smashed across the dance floor and my new husband driving me home at midnight in stunned silence, that marble quiet felt like a different planet. The passbook was zipped inside a sandwich bag now, the pages buckled and brown-stained, smelling faintly of champagne and pond water, looking exactly as worthless as my father had announced it was. My name is Margot, and at 31 I'd spent my whole life learning how to take up as little room as possible. I'm a palliative nurse. I sit with people while they die. I'm good at being the calm thing in the corner that nobody really notices. The one holding the hand and watching the monitor while the family falls apart. I know how to keep a secret. I know how to swallow my own face so it doesn't show. But standing in that lobby in a coat I'd bought secondhand off a marketplace listing, waiting for a kid behind the counter to finish typing, I felt like everyone could see straight through me. I just need the balance on this one, please, I said and slid the bag across the counter. It was a gift from my grandfather. The teller couldn't have been more than 22. She picked the bag up with 2 fingers like it might be sticky, wrinkled her nose at the smell, and keyed in the long account number stamped on the cover. I watched her get ready to give me the polite little frown that means the account's been closed since before she was born. Then she stopped. Her hand froze over the keyboard. She leaned toward the screen, blinked, scrolled, leaned closer, and every bit of color drained out of her face like someone had pulled a plug. "Ma'am," she said, and her voice came out then. "Could you, please don't go anywhere. Please, just stay right here." She didn't hit a panic button that I could see, but she might as well have. Within 30 seconds, the branch manager and a second man in a suit that fit too well to be off a rack were crossing the floor toward me, fast and quiet. Neither of them looked at my thrift store coat. They looked at me the way you'd look at someone you've been told to expect for a very long time. "Miss Whitford," the man in the good suit said, and held an arm out toward a side hallway. "Thank you for coming in. We've had this account flagged for review for years, waiting for it to be claimed. Would you come back with us, somewhere private?" They walked me into a little windowless room that smelled like old paper and printer toner, sat me in a leather chair and went to pull the file. And while I waited, I closed my eyes, and the cold of that room took me somewhere I hadn't let myself go in 20 years. I was 11, kneeling on the hardwood in my father's study with a cloth in my hand, scrubbing scotch out of the grain because he tipped his glass over on purpose and called it an accident. He sat above me in his armchair, the good one, swirling what was left in the glass, watching. My father never raised his voice when there was an audience to perform for. He liked it slow. He liked watching me get smaller. My brother sprawled on the couch with a controller in his hands, and his shoes up on the coffee table I'd polished that morning. And my father said, soft as anything, "You missed a spot, sweetheart," and smiled while he said it. When my grandfather came in from the hall and went to lift me up by the elbow, my father's voice turned to a blade. "Touch that rag, old man, and I'll have you in a home by Friday so fast you won't have time to pack your heart pills." So my grandfather stopped. He stood there with his hands at his sides and his jaw working, and I scrubbed until my knuckles split, because I'd already learned the family rule by heart. The girl cleans up. The boy gets the world. I was worth exactly as much as I could endure without making noise. The vault door clunked shut somewhere down the hall and pulled me back to the leather chair. I opened my eyes. I wasn't 11. I was the one holding the matches now. The man in the good suit came back with a file thick as a phone book and laid it on the table between us. "Your grandfather didn't open an ordinary savings account, Miss Whitford," he said. He turned a page toward me with one finger. "Back in 1984, he opened an in-trust investment account with you named as the sole beneficiary. He bought into a handful of American technology companies almost no one had heard of, plus a couple of the boring Canadian banks. And then, and this is the unusual part, he never touched it. 41 years. Every dividend reinvested. Nothing withdrawn. Not $1. He slid a printed statement across. Because he passed away this past winter, the account is now payable to you, free and clear. The current market value, as of close yesterday, is $9,680,000. I read the number 3 times. 9,680,000. It just sat there on the page. Black ink. No opinion about itself. I thought about the champagne bucket. I thought about my father standing up in front of 200 people holding this exact book over his head, calling it garbage. He'd had $10 million in his hand and thrown it into the ice because he was too proud to crack the cover and look. "Is anyone else on this account?" I asked. My voice came out flat and clean, the voice I used to tell families that it's almost time. "A co-owner? A second beneficiary?" "No one," the man said. "It's entirely yours." I put 2 fingers on the ruined little passbook on the table. It wasn't money anymore. It was a tool. And for the first time in my whole life, I knew exactly what I was going to use it for. My husband didn't look up when I came through the door of our apartment in the East End. Elliot was hunched at the kitchen table behind a wall of printed spreadsheets, the light of his laptop blue on his face. He works as a forensic accountant, the kind of man companies hire when they're pretty sure they've been robbed but can't prove who did it. He finds the hairline crack in the foundation that nobody else can see. "It's not an empire, Margot," he said, before I'd even got my coat off. He turned the screen toward me. "It's a house of cards held up with bridge loans and ego." I'd expected to see money. My whole life. My father had bragged about the money at galas, at Christmas, at the dinner table while my grandfather sat there saying nothing. I expected to see those 9 zeros he was always waving around. Instead, the screen was all red. "He's insolvent," Elliot said, tapping the trackpad. "The development on the waterfront stalled out 18 months ago and the bank's already started power of sale. The family fund he tells everyone he manages, it's empty. He's been shuffling the same 200 grand between 5 numbered companies to make it look like he's liquid when a lender checks. And here's the part that matters." He pulled up a scanned letter with the maple leaf letterhead at the top. "Canada Revenue's been on him for 2 years. They issued a notice of reassessment in the spring, and the file's been kicked up to their criminal investigations program. The Ontario Securities Commission has a parallel look going. He's not a developer anymore. He's a drowning man, and the water's at his chin." I stared at all that red. The man who'd thrown my grandfather's life's work into a bucket of ice wasn't a titan of anything. He was broke, and he was scared. And broke, scared men will do anything for cash. My phone rang in my hand. His name on the screen. I set it on the table and put it on speaker, and Elliot stopped typing. "Margot." "No, hello. No, I'm sorry about the wedding." Just the same bulletproof confidence of a man who still believed he owned everything he could see. "I've been thinking about that shack your grandfather left you. The place up on the lake." The cottage. A little board and batten place on the lake up in Muskoka. The one spot in the world where my grandfather had ever seemed like a whole person. He'd left it to me in his will along with the passbook. "What about it?" I asked. I put my hand flat on the table to keep it from shaking, but I made sure my voice stayed cold. "I'm going to do you a favor," he said. "I talked to my lawyer. We can move that property quick, get you a clean number for it, and roll the proceeds into the family company so you actually see a return instead of paying property tax on a leaky roof in the bush. You're a nurse, honey. You don't know the first thing about a survey or a septic field. Let me take the headache off you." He wanted the cottage. It was the one solid thing my grandfather had ever managed to keep out of his hands, and it was worth maybe $350,000. Pocket change to the man he pretended to be. A lifeline to the man he actually was. "I'm not selling, Dad," I said. The line went quiet, and then the mask came off all at once. "You listen to me." His voice dropped an octave, that snake's belly register I'd grown up dreading. "That old man was not of sound mind when he signed any of that over to you. And I've got people who'll swear to it. You don't sign that property over to the family trust by Friday, I'll have you in court for exercising undue influence on a senile old man. And I'll drag it through estate litigation until your savings are gone and your little nursing license is in question. Do you understand me? You are so far out of your depth you can't see the bottom." He wasn't protecting me, he was hunting. Sniffing out any asset he could grab, sell, and pour into the black hole under his feet before the regulators got there. "I understand," I said. "Perfectly." "Good. I'll have the papers couriered." The line went dead. I looked at Elliot. He wasn't frightened. He was smiling, slow and cold, the same thing I could feel rising up the back of my own throat. My father thought he was leaning on a soft, scared daughter. He had no idea he'd just handed us the blueprints to his own demolition. He was desperate, and desperate men sign things they shouldn't. I let a full day go by before I called him back. Silence does the work for you. If you let it, it gives the panic room to grow. Elliot and I didn't spend that day frightened. We spent it building. We didn't hire a litigator to fight him over the cottage. We sat down with the paralegal and an estate lawyer Elliot trusted, and we had them draw up a real document. Nothing forged, nothing faked, every word of it true and binding. An acknowledgement of beneficial ownership and historical trusteeship, the kind of paper a person signs when they're formally taking responsibility for an account. We made it look, on the surface, exactly like the transfer authorization my father was expecting to receive. Same letterhead, same boring gray clauses, same signature line at the bottom. Only the fine print, the part he would never in 1,000 years bother to read, declared that the signatory had directed and controlled the 5 numbered companies for the past 20 years and accepted personal liability for everything that had moved through them. When I finally dialed him back, I gave the performance of my life. I didn't bring the woman who'd walked out of that bank vault. I brought the 11-year-old on the study floor. "Dad," I whispered when he picked up, and I let it wobble. I'm sorry I hung up. I didn't know what to say." "You should be sorry," he snapped. But the edge had gone dull. He was listening now. "It's not just the cottage," I said, pitching it right at the frequency of frightened, useless girl. "I went to the bank. About Grandpa's passbook. It wasn't empty, Dad." The line went perfectly still. I could practically hear the gears turning, the math running behind his teeth. "How much?" he said. Not a question. The greed came through the phone like a smell. "Almost 10 million. I made my breath catch. 9.6. "But Dad, I don't..." The man at the bank kept talking about capital gains and a deemed disposition and a CRA review, and I got so scared I think I did something wrong. I think they're gonna take half of it in tax. And I don't know how to protect it. I don't know what to do. It was perfect bait, because it was exactly what he'd always believed about me. Weak, slow, incapable of holding power without dropping it. And it was exactly what he needed. A clean $10 million transfusion to plug every hole in his sinking ship. Listen to me very carefully, Margot. And just like that, the bully turned into the savior, the change so smooth it made my skin crawl. Do not sign one thing for that bank. Do not talk to a lawyer, not one. You bring that paperwork to me, and I'll shelter the whole thing under the family trust. We classify it as a pre-existing family asset. We backdate the basis. The tax problem just disappears. I can do that. I'm doing this for you, sweetheart, to keep you safe. To keep me safe. He wanted to swallow my grandfather's last gift whole and use it to fill the grave he dug himself. Can we do it tonight?" I asked. No, too fast. He needed time to get his own fake transfer papers drawn up, so he'd have something to sign back. Saturday. I've got the Builder of the Year gala at the Royal York. Bring everything there. We'll sign it all upstairs in the suite before my speech, and then I'll announce the new family fund from the stage. It'll look completely above board. Bring it Saturday. He wanted the audience. Of course he did. He wanted the glory of standing up in front of every important person in the city and announcing a $10 million windfall as proof of his own genius. Okay, I said. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for fixing this. That's what fathers are for, he said. I hung up and looked at Elliot, and I let the fear fall right off my face. He bit, I said. Elliot was already at the printer. The Builder of the Year gala took up the whole of the big ballroom at the Fairmont Royal York, the grand old railway hotel across from Union Station where my father had been getting his picture taken for 30 years. Chandeliers, a string quartet, a who's who of developers and bank executives, and 2 members of provincial parliament working the room with their drinks held just so. Old Toronto money, new condo money, and somewhere in the middle of it, my father, clawing. I came in at 5 to 8. I wasn't in the beige, sit-quietly clothes he'd always liked to see me in. I had on a structured red dress that cost more than the car I drove there. I walked through the middle of the crowd instead of skirting the edges of it, which I'd never once done in my life. And the strangest thing happened. People stepped aside. My brother was over by the bar laughing too loud at something, already 3 or 4 deep into the open bar, playing Prince to a kingdom that didn't exist. He didn't see me. He never did. My father stood near the front of the room between one of the MPPs and a bank vice president, glowing, lit up from inside with the certainty of a man who thinks he's just pulled off the heist of his life. When he spotted me coming, his smile held for the cameras, but his eyes went narrow. He heeled off and met me at the foot of the stage steps. "You're late," he said through his teeth, smiling the whole time for a passing photographer. "You have it?" "I haven't taken it out since," and held out a slim blue leather folder. He took it out of my hands. The greed coming off in like heat off pavement in July. "Is it all in here? The transfer, the power of attorney?" "It's all there, Dad, just like you said. It puts the whole 9.6 under the family trust's control. You just sign as the trustee accepting it." He flipped the folder open. He didn't read the clauses. He didn't look at the definitions. He didn't wonder why a simple transfer ran 11 pages, or why the heading said acknowledgement and assumption of trusteeship and personal liability, or why the schedule at the back listed 5 numbered Ontario companies and dates that ran back 2 decades. A careful man would have asked one question. My father had never once in his life believed he needed to be careful around me. He pulled a fountain pen out of his breast pocket, the same kind he'd used to sign my report cards without reading them, and he scrawled his name across the line with a flourish. "You did the right thing, Margot," he said, snapping the folder shut and handing it back without a second look. "Go find a seat at the back. I've got a speech to give." He took the stairs 2 at a time. The lights came up on the podium. The room hushed. I didn't go to the back. I stepped to the side of the stage where the light was poor, opened the folder, photographed the signed page, and sent it. 3 kilometers away in our apartment, Elliot received it, attached it to the whistleblower file we'd spent a week building, and the OSC had already opened an intake number on, and submitted the whole package to the Commission, to CRA's Criminal Investigations Unit, and to the RCMP's Financial Crimes Desk. None of it was sprung in a single night. The machine had been idling for days, waiting for one signature to start the engine. This was just the key turning. Up on the stage, my father leaned into the microphone, beaming. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight I'm proud to announce a historic expansion of our family foundation, a new $10 million commitment to housing in this city." He was confessing in real time in front of 400 witnesses. He was standing up and claiming ownership of money I had just chained to 20 years of fraud, declaring himself the controlling mind of every shell he'd ever hidden behind. He thought he was unveiling his legacy. He was reading himself his own rights. My phone buzzed once against my palm. Filed. All 3. Confirmation in. My father was still talking when the big screen behind him flickered. The foundation logo blinked out. In its place, a regulatory seal came up, white on a blue field, and under it a line of plain black text that I will remember on my deathbed. Aces set restraint order. In effect. The applause died in pieces, like a wave pulling back off the sand. My father turned and looked at the screen, and the thing on his face wasn't fear. Not yet. It was confusion. His brain refused to accept a version of the night that wasn't the one in his head. That was always his real weakness. Not stupidity, but entitlement so complete he couldn't imagine that someone he decided was beneath him could ever be the one to bring him down. The ballroom doors opened at the back. They didn't burst. That only happens in movies. They opened, and a handful of people in plain clothes and a couple of uniformed officers came down the center aisle at a walk, and somehow that was so much worse. The lead investigator reached the foot of the stage and held up a folded paper. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to step away from the podium," she said. My father gripped the mic stand with both hands. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "We do," she said almost gently. "You're the man who just signed an acknowledgement a few minutes ago accepting personal responsibility for 20 years of unreported accounts. We've got a copy." He spun and found me in the crowd, and the room turned with him. "She did this. My own daughter set me up." "You can tell that to the Crown," the investigator said. "They didn't drag him. They didn't even raise their voices. They walked him out of his own gala past 400 people with their phones up. A man in a rented tuxedo who, 40 minutes earlier, had owned the room. He didn't look broken. He looked baffled, right up until the doors closed behind him. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. I'd gone up to the suite to get my coat, the one I'd left over a chair, and I heard the lock turn behind me. My brother stood with his back against the door, tie loose, face the color of raw meat, sweat standing out on his forehead. "You ruined everything," he said. "It was already ruined," I said. "The money was never real, Trevor. It's been gone for years. He was going to take Grandpa's account and use it to cover his own crimes, and he'd have hung you out to dry the second the lenders came knocking. He always would have." I watched something move behind his eyes. For half a second I thought maybe it landed, maybe somewhere under all those years of being handed everything. He saw a flash of how he'd been used too, raised to be a prince of a kingdom that was never anything but debt. But it was only half a second. Then he grabbed his steak knife off the room service cart by the wall, and it wasn't a plan anymore. It was the pure animal terror of a man watching the only floor he'd ever stood on fall away. Elliot stepped in from the bedroom doorway and put himself between us. "Put it down," he said, very even. "You don't want this. Put it down and open the door." My brother lunged. It wasn't aimed, it was just thrown forward, all panic. Elliot caught his wrist, turned it the way you turn a doorknob, and the knife hit the carpet. He didn't break the arm. He didn't have to. My brother folded onto the floor and stayed there. When security and one of the officers came through the door, my brother was crying, and I don't think it was the wrist. I think it was that, for the first time in his life, nobody in the room thought he mattered, and he could feel it. That was 11 weeks ago. This morning the lake is flat and silver, and the air off it smells like cedar and cold water and the percolator I finally got working. I'm on the porch of the cottage, mine, all the way mine now. The will probated and the title clear. I had the roof reshingled and the dock rebuilt, and I pulled 40 years of ivy off the chimney with my own 2 hands, and now it's a home instead of a memory. My father was denied bail. The Crown argued flight risk and the judge agreed. His assets are frozen and the waterfront site went back to the bank. My brother took a plea on the lesser charge and got probation and a number for a helpline. There's no inheritance waiting for him at the end of it, only a job, which is the one thing he was never raised to know how to keep. My mother, who walked out when I was 9 and turned up exactly twice in 22 years, both times when she heard money in the air, called me once after the gala made the papers. She wanted to talk about what was fair to family. I let it go to voicemail. I haven't called back, and I've made my peace with the fact that I never will. Some doors you get to leave shut. I burned my copy of that signed acknowledgement in the fire pit by the water last night. I don't need it. The Commission and the CRA and the Crown have every original that matters, certified and sealed. The page in my hand was just the last bit of fear I'd been carrying, and I watched it curl up black and go to nothing over the coals, and I felt about 300 pounds lighter. Elliot came out with 2 mugs and sat down on the step beside me. "The transfer cleared," he told me. "The whole 9.6, in my name, finally, free." "What do you want to do with it?" he asked. I looked out at the lake my grandfather loved, the one place he ever got to be himself. And I thought about the 11-year-old on the study floor with her knuckles cracked open, certain she was only worth what she could stand to take without making a sound. "Nothing," I said. "Let it sit. Let it grow another 40 years if it wants to. I'm still a nurse. I'm still me." The money was never the power. The power was knowing, finally, that I was never the garbage. He was. And the family I've got is the one sitting next to me on this step. The one who stepped in front of the knife. The one who stayed when the vault came open, and the whole rotten thing finally fell. For a long time I believed the quietest person in the room was the weakest one. My father taught me that on his study floor, with a glass of scotch he spilled on purpose. He was wrong, and it took me 31 years and a soaked little passbook to understand exactly how wrong. Nothing that happened at that gala was luck. Every piece of it was something he built himself, brick by brick, over 20 years. The shell companies, the lies to the lenders, the habit of never reading a thing handed to him by someone he'd decided didn't matter. That was the trap. I didn't spring it. He'd been standing in it his whole life. He fell because of who he chose to be, the same way I rose because of who I'd quietly become while he wasn't looking. I think about that a lot now, on the porch by the lake. The reason my grandfather's money survived 41 years wasn't a clever trick. It was that he refused to do the easy, greedy thing, even once. He had the patience to leave it alone and the decency to leave it to the one grandchild everyone else overlooked. That's the part I want to hold on to. Not the number in the account, but the choice underneath it. You can have all the cleverness in the world, and if you point it at the wrong thing, it just makes you a faster kind of cruel. Which is what my brother Trevor never understood. He had every advantage and used none of it, because nobody ever taught him that being given everything is not the same as being worth something. What carried me wasn't rage. I want to be honest about that. Rage is loud and it burns out fast. What carried me was the slow, stubborn refusal to break that I learned at bedsides, sitting with people through the worst nights of their lives, learning to stay calm when everything in the room said panic. That steadiness is the thing I'm proudest of. It let me wait a full day before calling my father back when every nerve wanted to scream. It let Elliot and me build something true and patient instead of something quick and dirty. We never forged a word, because the right way was also the strong way. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Guard the part of you that knows right from wrong even when no one's watching, because that's the only thing they can never take. Sharpen your mind, not to outsmart people, but so you're never again at the mercy of someone counting on you to be too scared to read the fine print. And when life knocks you onto the floor with a rag in your hand, get up the slow way, the patient way, the way that lasts. The garbage was never the passbook, and it was never me. It was the man who couldn't tell the difference. I can. Now you can too.